Well, step one, we have to get this dividing head on the mill. And before we do that, we have to take the vise off. This vise gets heavier every year. And of course now I have this swivel base on it, so that even makes it heavier. I'm gonna set it on this stool over here. I don't know how much this thing weighs. It's got to be 100 maybe. All right, it should sit there. Let me get some rags. Well, I'm glad you could join me today, guys. And as we continue this trip on making the gear for this bandsaw, and just take a moment and clean this mill table up. See, we have a little bit of staining on the table. That's normal. We don't mind it a bit. That happens. How I clean my T-slots is I stuff the rag in the end of the T-slot here, drag it through into the coolant reservoir. Okay. And that's going to be good enough. Let's get some light on the situation here. Now I'm gonna take my stone. I gotta go get my stone. Oh, I guess it's in here. Oh, I don't know where it went. I'm looking for my hone stone. It is around here somewhere. Let's see, where would it be? Okay. Yeah, it was all over by the surface grinder, which is, I guess, normally where you use one. Now I'm not removing any material on this table. All I'm doing is using the stone to see if I can find any burrs. That feels pretty good. If I feel a little drag or hear a little click, I know I've got a burr, and I'll concentrate on that location until it's gone. We want to start out by having our tooling in full contact with the table. I'll just stick that in here. Okay. All right, let's go get the dividing head. There's that. And get the tailstock. Alrighty, I'll set that up with some T-nuts now, and we got a good start on it. Now there's graduations on the rotation of this head, and I've got it set on 0, which should be horizontal, but what I will do is run an indicator up and down this plate, make sure that it is, you know, pretty square. Okay, next step. All right, Houston, we have a problem. I'm setting up with my index head here to cut this gear, and I've cut a gear on here before successfully, but what I didn't have is I didn't have the keys installed in the bottom of the head and in the bottom of the tailstock. So I thought it would be handy to be able to use those keys. Those keys register in the T-slot here, which is about 625. And so the keys were a little bit wide because they're metric. And then I thought, no problem. I threw them up on the surface grinder, and I relieved the bottom of the keys so they would just fit into the T-slot here. Now, what that assumes is that the center line, the key slot is lined up with the center line of the index head, and then the key slot here, or yeah, key slot is centered up with the center line of the center on the tailstock. So since this was the first time I used the keys installed, I thought I'd better check my setup. And so I hope you can see this, but if I set my indicator here, I think you can see that. Let's see. Well, I won't give you the exact reading, but I'll just slide this along here. And you can see how far out of line that is. This is the mandrel I made, and it might not be perfect, but I know it's not that far out. By the way, somebody asked a question when I demonstrated some applications with my height gauge here, my surface gauge, what I use those 2 pins for. And I illustrated by dropping the pins down and using the edge of my surface plate to slide it along, and then somebody came back with a comment, it's like, when would you ever use that in conjunction with a surface gauge? Well, I was just giving a demo on what that was like. I can't really think of any applications on the surface, or the surface plate that you would use those pins drop down, but this is a real life application. So I drop down the pins to register on the back side of my table here, and I have to make sure that your table is lined up with your T-slots and the what would you call it, the T-slots in the table, so that it's running true. I checked and mine is, but you know, I wouldn't assume that because this one is good. So I dropped those pins. Now I can slide this back and forth. Why would I do that? I can put an indicator in the spindle, and I can crank the table back and forth, but I find this is faster. So sliding this back and forth, I can see that this tailstock center is out of line with the center on the index head. So that's a must fix. It's way too far out. If it's, let's say it's 3.5 thousandths out from here to here, which is about probably 1 3/4 inches, you can imagine, you know, how far out it would be from here to from the center of the index head to the center of the tailstock. Anyway, it probably wouldn't make much difference in the 3/4 of an inch that I'm going to travel across this gear blank, but you know, better to know where it's at in case it ever does matter. It could well at some point make a difference. So this is a must fix. Now I'm going to say that the keyway on the bottom of this is true, and I verified that by running the mill back and forth across here, and it is running relatively true. Not perfect, but good enough for me. So I'm going to use this as the master, and I'm going to set this center up so that this center is lined up with this center. Now, I did some checking here. This is weird, but so the T-slot, you know, of course, is lined up with the direction of my table. So I ran the table back and forth. This is not in line with the T-slot, and also the center bore is not in line with this in the other direction. So that's a strange situation. I think I'm going to have to take this off, set it up on the surface plate, and try to figure out how to recut the bottom key way, and then I'll make custom keys for it, and that should take care of that. But so I'll set everything up on the tailstock to be true to my index head. So I have to do that before I cut the gear. So yeah, okay, so I'll get started on that now. I'm going to take a moment here and I'm going to explain to you why I messed up that last gear. This is my Chinese index head, and I like the quality of it and the function of it pretty well, except I'm going to show you one downfall here. Because it is such a small index head, it's kind of a what you call a mini index head. These two arms only collapse down so far. So in my instance, I need 20 holes on this plate. I need to move to make one index for the gear divisions that I need to move 20 holes. But because these only collapse down so far, for example, let's say I'm right here, when I move around the index, I can only move 18 holes. So I'll move 18 holes, but then to get my 20, I have to move this freehand and pull this pin and kind of feel my way in, 1 hole, 2 hole. Now I have my 20 holes. I have to do that, like in the case of this gear, I have to do that 46 times. And my attention span after the first dozen is starting to wander a little bit. So I'll really have to pay attention this time. But so evidently when I was making that last gear, a couple of times I didn't get my 2 extra holes, and so the indexing, the spacing was off between the teeth, and it runs on the saw all right. I've been running it for almost a year, but I'm just afraid, because there's a couple of thin teeth, I'm just afraid those things are going to shear off, and if they do, you know, it's going to really wreck the inside of that transmission when those teeth pieces are floating around. So that's how it happened, and I've looked at this thing a dozen different ways trying to figure out how I can get this thing to collapse down farther, and I just don't see how I can do it. So I guess I'll do it you know, that way, but just pay better attention this time. So there you have it. That's why that happened, and that's why I'm recutting this gear. This is a cast iron gear, so when it's cut, it's ready to go in the saw. So okay, I'm going to get going on cutting the teeth on this, and you know what, I'll catch up with you guys in a few minutes. See. Okay guys, this gear is complete and I'm ready to put it in the bandsaw, and I think I'll film that, so stay tuned and we'll slip her in there and see how she works. I think it came out pretty good. Okay, see you next time. Bye.